welcome to TEDxNTU 2021.
Hi, Sweta. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here with us today. I'm sure all of us, both the TEDxNTU team as well as our audience, are quite eager to know how we can better navigate the world of social media and the conversations that take place there. Considering the present context that we are at, where everything is going digital, people have better access to social media platforms, and as a result of that, we see a lot of unfiltered opinions online. Now, I feel like a lot of us, because of those unfiltered opinions, have mixed views about the benefits of social media platforms and such forums. So how do you think that, these conversations and disagreements that take place over there? So what is your take on that?
Right. So I think firstly we must understand that the online world is the real world. It's not a separate part, right? So it's an extension of the real world. And our online selves are essentially extensions of our own selves. And perhaps how we behave online is how we would behave in person in the absence of societal norms as well. In all seriousness, I think it is a good thing. There has been a lot of good that has come out of this social media phenomenon. On one hand, you can think of the access to power has been decreased tremendously, and now everyone can have access to their politicians, policymakers, corporations. They can articulate their views on societal affairs, and a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, people in power do respond to whatever is said online. So that's a good thing, reducing the access to power or making power more accessible. And you have seen many positive movements coming out of the online world themselves. For instance, you see the hashtag #MeToo movement, an entirely social media phenomenon, or mostly. On the other hand, we must not kid ourselves and think that this is wholly a positive enterprise as well, right? Because one, you have the democratization of knowledge. This comes with its own good and bad. So on one hand, you see that, as I said earlier, people have access to power. On the other hand, everyone can be an expert on everything, right? Sometimes you have a person who's a financial expert, a health guru, a football analyst, a political scientist, sometimes all in one post, right? And on the other hand, at the same time, you also see that you have more varied emotions on display, and you have more contestations because everybody can utter their opinions. So the good thing about that is contestations of ideas leads to better ideas being discussed. The bad thing is with contestations, there will always be more tensions.
Quite right, Walid. I mean, what you just mentioned brings to my mind something that we had discussed with one of our previous year speakers, Margaret Thomas. She said something quite similar about, dissenting opinions and armchair activists. I guess everyone on social media has their own set of facts now, right? And this also kind of makes you think of something that Justin Rosenstein from The Social Dilemma had said about looking at the other side and thinking, how could they be so stupid, right? So this forms a very apt characterization of the social as well as the political discourse that we see online. And more often than not, they go into these, tailspin where emotions take charge as opposed to facts. To some, I guess it makes you fearful whether this would translate or manifest into real-world violence. So how do you compare the difference between the interactions that we have online versus offline?
Yeah, I think it would be an understatement to say that our social media etiquette has not evolved in the same way that our in-person etiquette has. And that's why you see half the time the things we hear online, or sometimes even we say online, are things that we would never say to people in person. So I can even see this from my own class discussions, right, where we discuss the most contentious societal issues. And no matter how robust or feisty the debates get, there is always some modicum of decorum there that prevents things from getting out of hand. And every time I witness these debates, I wonder whether they could take place online. Well, they could, and they do, but perhaps not in the same way, right? And it brings me to the second part of your question, right, about the emotions part. can we take or should we take emotions out of these online debates? And I would say it's neither possible nor desirable, right? It's not possible because human beings are not just rational creatures. We are emotional creatures. We are spiritual creatures, right? So it's not possible for us to be in a situation where we extricate our emotions out of it. It's not possible in person or online. And it's not possible also because if you weigh in on an issue, if you champion a particular cause, that means you must feel emotional about it, right? You must have some emotions attached to it. That's why you articulate your opinions online anyway, in the first place. So it's not possible to do that. And I would say it's not even desirable because I do want people to enter online discussions or in-person discussions with some emotions, right? I do want them to have some emotions or traits such as empathy and compassion and kindness. And these are not exactly rational.
Right. It's very interesting how you say that we need to invite emotions into debates. So how should we do that? Like, can you share some experiences where conversations have welcomed emotions into it?
Right, as I said earlier, so the ideal would be somebody enters a debate with compassion, kindness, and empathy, right? But we can fall way short of the ideal, and it's fine, and that's what free speech is for, and that's why free speech needs to be protected. The beauty of free speech is you allow people to come into discussions with all sorts of emotions. Even if they are not empathetic, you allow them to come in the discussion with anger, with resentment, with a level of angst, and that's fine. And it's through the process of dialogue and persuasion and debate, which is only possible because of free speech. Through that, we can understand why people are angry, why people are resentful, and we get to the root of their emotions and the problems, and maybe we can discuss the solutions at hand. And I think it's important to understand what is the purpose of debate and dialogue and discussion. And for me, ultimately, why you have these debates online or in person, these discussions, is to pursue the truth with a small letter T, because I understand this is a secular space. So the pursuit of truth is what is most important. And I think sometimes people are well-meaning and they say that we must restrict and constrict the space for discussion because we must protect feelings. And I think to have a conducive environment to ensure that truth is ultimately pursued, you must allow room for people to come in with whatever emotions, but at the same time, you understand that the pursuit of truth is the ultimate aim and not the protection of feelings.
Right. It makes it a very tricky space to navigate, if I must say so.
Maybe I'm adding to the mist. No.
But on that note, then would this mean that people should not take a stance on anything?
Right, that's the thing, right? If you are going to pursue a particular social cause, right, you will offend some people. If you are going to take a stand on any important societal issue, which is by nature inherently divisive, you will offend people. And therefore, the offense of people or the potential to offend people cannot be the benchmark, or it cannot be the arbiter in terms of whether we should have that discussion, right? We must be comfortable when we enter these discussions with the fact that we are perhaps going to hurt people's feelings and we are going to get our feelings hurt as well. Now, I am not saying that we should go out of our way to purposely offend people. No. I think what we should do is to strike the balance is as much as we educate people not to give offense, we educate people not to take offense as well.
So why do you think that people tend to react the way they do with whom they disagree on social media?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think there are two main reasons. One is the lack of intellectual humility, right? And the lack of intellectual humility can come from a feeling of, you are so smart and you're so intelligent. Just now you said, right? Sometimes we look at other people and we think, oh, why are you so stupid? How are we so sure that those people are not saying the same thing about us? How are we so sure that we are not the stupid ones in this case, right? So it's a lack of intellectual humility that can actually lead to something even more dangerous, which is an assumption of moral superiority. And I think the moment you are not intellectually humble, it is dangerous for society. And I think what we should do is when we enter discussions, we should always believe that we are right. because otherwise why have that opinion if you don't believe you're right? At the same time, be open to the possibility that we are wrong. I think the lack of intellectual humility is the first reason for that. The second reason is a more practical problem. I think it's just the nature of social media and our social media feed. Let's face it, all of us are friends generally with people who think like us, who we like them because they think like us, they are like us. As much as we like to think of our circles as diverse, essentially, intellectually, we are friends with people who more or less think like us. And therefore, our social media feed may just be reinforcing our own prior predispositions. And we may be exposed, by and large, to ideas which we already agree with. And the danger is we may start thinking that the whole world thinks like that because that's all we see online on a daily basis. And when we are confronted with an idea which is different, suddenly we may get upset or we may think, oh, why are you so stupid, right? Essentially, right, our worldview may just be our world's view.
Interesting. I mean, essentially, you're correct by saying our worldviews are increasingly getting reduced to our social media feeds. The facts, the opinions, the assumptions that are getting reinforced over and over again by these expertly manipulated feeds kind of puts us in that notion that how can others even conceive of thinking something differently, right? So how shall we break through and even beyond this mist that is narrowing our perspectives?
Right. So for me personally, what I try to do is I try to get out of the problem I just articulated is I add as many random people as possible on my Facebook and Instagram feed, and I accept as many random requests as possible, so that I am not stuck in my own echo chamber, so that I am exposed to how people who do not think like me, what exactly they are thinking, what exactly they are saying, so that I can contend with this in real life. And so I expect to get a few random requests after this session. So personally, that's what I do, but I would say there are 3 other practical things that we can do, right? And the first is always give the benefit of the doubt to somebody who disagrees with us. Even if that person may say something in a clumsy manner, we do not rush to impugn intentions. And we can say, maybe, why are you saying this? What is the motivation behind this? Because ultimately, intent does matter. I know some people say it doesn't, but intention does matter, right? And we must give the person the benefit of the doubt unless that person has a proven track record, right? And some people do. The second thing I would say is we must allow room for growth, right? And this is how we balance accountability while not falling into the trap of cancel culture. I think when somebody makes a mistake, right, we must debate them, we refute them, we allow them space to grow and learn, hopefully. Because I think, yes, for sure, some people are beyond learning, but I think most people are not. Well, I hope most people are not. And you know, if we were to cancel a person on the first mistake, right, nobody would ever be a public speaker, right? So you and I wouldn't be here. Well, I definitely wouldn't be here, right? And I think let the person who has never sinned throw the first stone. And the final one is, I think we must engage with people who disagree with us far more than we engage with those who agree with us. And I know sometimes it's emotionally taxing, it's mentally draining, but it has to be done, especially if we are passionate about championing particular issues. And I try to do this on my own podcast, and I have discussions and debates with people whom I wildly disagree with. And sometimes, when even in that disagreement, I say, yeah, I still disagree with you, but I can see where you're coming from, right? I can be more sympathetic to your position. And at the end of the day, even if I cannot do that, I can just say, you know, let's just agree to disagree. So I think those are 3 practical things we can do to move beyond the mist.
You've actually given us quite a bit of food for thought. I mean, navigating social media these days, especially in the presence of so many unfiltered opinions, is quite a challenge, as well as it's interesting. I guess our conversation today has given me fresh perspective on how we should appreciate the views of others, because it allows us to grow, it allows us to learn, while maintaining some amount of social etiquette and practicing accountability. On that note, thank you so much again, Walid, for joining us at TEDxNTU 2021.
Okay, thank you.